Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Social Mobility Foundation's Employer Index webinar. Thank you to those of you who are returning entrants to the Social Mobility Employer Index, who've come back to find out more about entering this year, what's changed, what's stayed the same, and the process. And welcome to those of you who are considering being first-time entrants to the index. It's great to have you all here. We are recording the webinar, so if you want to listen back or share it with colleagues, or if you're joining us on the recording and listening back, welcome to you too. Today, I'm going to introduce my colleagues. We're going to cover some information about the index, the impact, the benefits for employers. We'll update on what's changed and what's staying the same for 2026. And there'll be an opportunity for all of you to answer questions and find out about the next steps. I'm Sarah Atkinson. I am lucky enough to be Chief Executive of the Social Mobility Foundation, the charity that runs the Social Mobility Employer Index. Really looking forward to supporting all of you this year. And I'll hand over to my colleagues.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Pleasure to see all of you joining and trickling in as we kick off today. My name's War. I'm the interim employee index manager for the SMF. And yeah, I look after all aspects of the index this year. That's the sort of online portal, the entry submissions, putting together this webinar along with my colleagues. It's a pleasure to see you all today. I'm going to hand over to Josie.
Hi, I'm Josie. I recently joined the SMF as a Social Mobility Index Coordinator, which means I support on the index this year, including communications and answering queries and webinars. And I'm really excited to be part of this event today.
Okay, if we move on to the agenda and some housekeeping, I think Sarah has actually covered a lot of it, but I'll briefly just reiterate some of the key points and the purpose of today. So as outlined, some of you, I think actually a good few of you are returning to the index for this year, which is amazing as we enter our 10th year of the SMEI. So we'll talk about reintroduction to the index, understanding what it is and its benefits, talk about some of the updates for 2026, what's changing and what is remaining the same. And then we'll go into a bit more detail about each individual section of the survey itself, outlining best practice and what you should be beginning to reflect on as you prepare your entry. And as Sarah mentioned, there'll be a Q&A towards the end, so please do submit any questions that you have throughout, and we'll be addressing the most common and the most popular questions towards the end of today's session. In terms of some housekeeping, as mentioned, this session is recorded, so there isn't any need for you to take any notes. A copy of the slides will also be sent out after today. And there will be also a dedicated FAQs document for you as well as part of the comms that follow on from today's event. So I'll hand back over to Sarah to talk about the index.
Thank you, Wa. So let's share a little bit about the Social Mobility Employer Index. This will be familiar to lots of you, but for anyone who are new to SMF or new to the index, we are a charity that works towards a society where everyone, whatever their socioeconomic background, can thrive and succeed in education and the workplace. We know that when we foster the potential of every young person in the country, we'll have brilliant economic and social success, and all of our communities will thrive. Every year, we work with over 4,000 young people to open doors to education and careers through our programmes of direct support. And lots of you will work with us or with other charities in the social mobility space to make those direct opportunities so young people can benefit. But we know that we also need to improve our systems so that rather than just helping young people directly to access opportunities, we can break down barriers that they face right across the piece in the workplace. And once talented young people get into the workplace, they can keep unlocking their potential. And that's where the Social Mobility Employer Index comes in. This will be the 10th year that we've run the Social Mobility Employer Index, the leading authority on employer-led and workplace social mobility. We all share a responsibility to ensure that young people, that everyone can thrive in the workplace and in businesses. The index is a benchmarking tool that can help you to be your internal roadmap and compass. You can set a social mobility strategy and measure your progress over time. Through the index, we support you to become leaders in building inclusive workplaces. We want to support you to improve your social mobility and socioeconomic diversity, to get better teams, to get more business insight, to build community in the workplace, to influence and to spread best practice. We're always looking to improve the index. We're always trying to make it easier to enter, more impactful. This year is no different. So we'll be sharing a couple of updates this year on how we recognise our index participants and covering more detail. But look, by joining this call today, by being part of this conversation, you're already taking vital steps to becoming a leader in social mobility best practice in your sector. So thank you for being interested in the index. Thank you for being part of our employer community. We know that businesses who join the index and act to improve socioeconomic diversity benefit. You tell us that you benefit. You tell us how valuable the index is for you. But we've got external research and benchmarks that demonstrate this. Internally, companies with better inclusion and social mobility have more success in recruiting and retaining top talent. There's evidence from Accenture that the profitability of organisations that focus on social mobility is 1.25 times higher than their competitors in the current economic environment. Who doesn't want greater productivity and greater profitability from your business? But we also know that you want to attract and retain the best talent. Again, in a competitive environment, access to the best people and supporting them to achieve their best potential is critical. Half of young people say they would be put off a job they wanted if an employer doesn't enter the index. Young people want to see employers spreading best practice, driving good practice, improving good practice when it comes to socioeconomic diversity. So it's an important part of talent acquisition, an important part of your employer brands. Now, don't just take my word for it. I would tell you that entering the index is important because it's hugely valuable to us as a charity and to our work to spread socioeconomic diversity. You'll hear from one of our employer entrants a bit later on about their perspective on entering the index and the opportunities it's created. And I'll share a couple of other quotes here from brilliant enterprise rent-a-car who've been in the index from the very beginning, and from City Press, an employee-owned PR company who are newer to the index, both of whom tell us that taking part in the index has been valuable for building strategy, for giving them insights, and a catalyst for change. I hope those of you who have already been participants in the index will agree that being part of the index has helped your business. And those of you who are here for the first time, I promise you that the index is designed to help you to focus, to learn, to improve practice, and to give you actionable feedback. We're proud of the impact that the index has made on individual employers and the opportunities it's created. And we're proud that the index is an important part of driving workplace social mobility across the piece over the last 10 years. Over 400 employers have entered the index. That means we've engaged almost 1 million employees last year, ensuring that there are opportunities in their workplace. Many employers have come back time after time because they've found that entering the index and the feedback that it gives them has helped them to drive practice, to measure themselves, and to push their strategy forward. And our emphasis is in practicality, giving you actionable insights that you can make change. In fact, almost half of returning entrants have made improvements in at least 10 of the metrics we measure by the index. That's a huge performance given the breadth of the work that you do and the breadth of the work that the index covers. And almost 60% of returning entrants are collecting data on the parental occupation of current employees. That's a critical data point that will help you to understand where social mobility is at in your business and will help you to measure change. We'll talk a bit more later on about the different aspects that we look at in the index, including that critical point about data. And I know one of the questions some of you as first-time entrants will probably have is, if we're not collecting workforce data, is it still beneficial to enter the index? It absolutely is, and we'll say a bit more about what that looks like later on. You do not have to be perfect to enter the index. This is accessible to everyone at every stage of your journey, and we'll share a bit more later on about what that looks like. Now, I know those of you who are coming back for the second or more entries to the index will always be keen to know, is there much change this year? We put our work into the index entrance process last year. We'd love to know, is anything different and what's staying the same? So I'm really happy to share a few updates for this year and a lot of feedback on what's staying the same. First, let's talk about the updates. So one of the key changes that we're making this year is the way that we will present your ranking in the index. Previously, index entrants have been ranked on a 1 to 75 basis. Those of you who've been lucky enough to come in the top 75, you will know your ranking, and as long as you're happy for us to do so, we've previously published and shared it. For 2026, we're moving away from individual numerical ranking to a new banded recognition system. What I mean by a banded recognition system is that we'll be grouping entrants according to performance. This will give you clearer recognition for the impact that you're making. Your ranking will help you to describe the level of achievement that you've made in terms of your index assessment and your social mobility performance, and give a much clearer, fairer way to recognise the efforts that all of our entrants have made. There'll be 4 bands to recognise different progress against our criteria. A top 3 banding, which we will publish, as we always have, and a 4th band to recognise those who are maybe at the very start of their index journey, at the very earliest stages of their social mobility strategies, and to recognise that commitment and that starting on the journey. Each of the 4 bands represents a different level of progress towards building inclusive workplaces. The most advanced organisations will be recognised accordingly, but those who are starting on their journey and those who are making important progress on the steps on the way will all be recognised and celebrated as part of the index. We'll recognise your consistent good practice, those of you who have built on previous performance, or those of you who have worked hard before you've entered the index, will recognise that consistency and will celebrate everybody. It expands our movement and brings more employers together. So we'll say a little bit more about the bands in a minute. And critically, we'll share the names that we've prepared for our new bandings, and we'll share much more about that after the webinar today. Those of you who've entered previously will probably be curious to know how previous rankings will map onto the new ranking. We're using thresholds, not a competitive rank, so it will look a little bit different. But those of you who've previously ranked highly, you're still going to be sitting within the higher bands of the new model, because one of the critical things that is staying the same is our assessment criteria. We're changing the way that we are grouping and presenting your performance, but our assessment criteria will still stay exactly the same. We're looking for exactly the same good practice, the same evidence, the same information, and we'll still be able to share with you the information about your own performance and the detailed assessment in your feedback report. Nothing will change there. We're also, and this is good news for anyone who's entered the index previously, we're staying consistent with our survey questions. There's very little change to the survey questions this year. The only real change is there's a new optional feedback section. We hope those of you who enter the index will be happy to answer a couple of questions about your experience of entering the index, your engagement, and what we can do to improve things in the future. This helps us to build a better index for all of our community of participants. But beyond that, the index questions are unchanged this year. We'll be able to share copies of the documents for all the index questions, and those of you who are first-time entrants, you'll have time to take a look at those and prepare. All of this information will be available to you after the webinar. We're also not changing the timeline. You've still got 3 months from submissions opening at the end of April until they close at the end of July. So those of you who want to know about your timeline to prepare, yes, the clock is ticking, but you've got plenty of time to be able to gather the information, bring colleagues together, and get ready to enter the index. Again, we'll be sharing all the information about registering on the portal, getting your index information ready after this webinar. And of course, the thing that doesn't change is our celebration of your commitment and all of the good work that is done by employers focusing on social mobility across the UK. So in the autumn, we'll publish the performers in the top 3 bands. We'll share with you all a communications toolkit with our new logos for the Index 2026, our new banding logos, on all of the information to help you to celebrate inside your organisation and externally the work that you've done to be recognised in the index. And any employers who are recognised in our new lowest banding, the commitment banding, you'll also get the opportunity to celebrate your commitment, which is exactly as it should be. Oh, forgive me, I've touched the wrong button here. Moving on then, let me share some information about our new bandings. So as I mentioned before, we've got 4 bandings for our employers ranking in the index. Our gold standard employers will receive a recognition as our pioneering employers. This recognition indicates that you are absolutely leading in best practice. You're innovating, you're driving, you're pushing forward, and you're demonstrating outstanding practice across all areas. Being a gold standard pioneering employer will be really special. But we want to recognise too the other employers who will perform in our ranking and achieve in our social mobility index. Our silver band employers will be ranked as progressive. These are our employers performing strongly in most areas across the index with evidence of sustained progress. You'll be the employers who are giving the pioneers a run for their money, pushing forward and demonstrating in terms of social mobility that you have sustained good practice. And then our bronze band employers will be the established employers. These are for employers who are meeting key baseline standards of good practice and actively developing your approach. You'll be pushing into progressive and into pioneering, and all of our feedback will always tell you what you need to do to achieve the next band. But we're recognising your good practice, your commitment across the piece, and your active development. And our 4th band, committed, for employers who take part in the index but do not yet meet the established thresholds. This will be some of you who are right at the start of your journey, exploring workplace social mobility. You probably won't have the data collection in place. You may not even be able to answer all of the sections of the index, but in showing your commitment to social mobility, your interest in getting feedback and joining the community, we think you deserve recognition as committed employers, and we will recognise you accordingly. So for our more advanced entrants, there's public recognition of your achievements and support to continue. For those of you who are at the start, this is a clearer route into the index. And for everybody at every stage, you'll still get the same feedback from us, the same advice on what to do next, and the same support at every stage of your journey. I hope you think this is a positive change and a good development. I'm sure there'll be questions later on about how this is all going to work, and we're really happy to share them. But I'm going to hand over to War now, who's going to take you through the index section by section.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, some really exciting changes. Hope you feel very positive, and like Sarah mentioned, we'll hopefully answer quite a few questions towards the end of the webinar. But yes, I'll now spend a bit of time, roughly around 5–10 minutes, providing an overview of each section of the index survey. Please note that all sections are optional. So for example, some of you may not do any outreach work for those aged younger than 18, so you may wish to opt out of section 1. But the more robust the evidence you provide, the better this helps to assess your banding. So strong data gathering informs measurement and provides tangible feedback on where your organization is at, and we can then compare that to your objectives, and you can use that as part of your strategy process. Speaking of section 1, here it is. This is the pre-18 outreach and working with young people section. We're looking at how effectively you target and engage young people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. In particular, we're looking at whether your outreach enables young people to make informed decisions. So the index rewards and scores well employers that offer effective, well-planned, targeted and evaluated outreach programs. Over the years, we've seen particularly strong improvements in outreach work from those employers who focus on having a good focus on examining the intentionality of outreach work, delineating between in-person and virtual outreach opportunities, understanding the extent to which you are collaborating to deliver outreach, whether that's with other employers or with existing infrastructure such as career hubs, and also evaluating what employers are doing rather than how they're doing it as well. That's also been a very important stepping stone for many organizations. In terms of what good practice looks like, so effective, well-planned, targeted and evaluated outreach programs that are accessible to young people from all lower socioeconomic backgrounds. Examples of this is our own Aspiring Professionals Program, our APP, which we delivered with the law firm Freshfields. So our program offers the opportunity for high-achieving students from lower economic backgrounds to access mentoring, work experience, university guidance and apprenticeships guidance, and career development from the age of 16 all the way until their first job, whether that's a graduate opportunity or an apprenticeship. We've been in partnership with Freshfields now for many, many years. For example, those who've attended our skill sessions with Freshfields and their work experience programs, a number of them have been offered places following their time in education and through the recruitment process. So this is an example of out of many, many examples of partnering up and supporting young people with outreach opportunities before the age of 18 to get great insight into what's possible within your organization. For each section, for each slide, we'll highlight a question or two that you can begin to consider for your index submission. So for section 1, reflect on what ways you can improve your strategic planning for pre-18 outreach. So which teams, which functional areas are involved in planning and delivering impactful outreach opportunities for your organization? Are you intentional with your in-person and virtual programs if you offer both? How can they be differentiated for those who perhaps struggle to travel into cities, who struggle with travel costs? How are you making that as effective as possible? Okay, moving on to the next slide, on to section 2. This is attraction and post-18 outreach, so for those young people aged over 18. And for this section, we're looking at how effectively you engage with young people from, once again, from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, but at the start of the recruitment pipeline. So we're looking to sort of highly score those organizations that are making an effective effort to diversify their attraction at this stage of the recruitment, process. In terms of what good looks like, an active effort to diversify attraction methods and engage with young people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds across school leaver programs, apprenticeship programs, and graduate programs, preferably via paid opportunities. An example of this would be Enterprise, which we've hinted at the start of the webinar. They have a presence of over 60 careers fairs throughout the year, ranging across 100 universities, offering on-campus competency interviews and coaching sessions. And 80% of their new hires come from non-Russell Group universities as well. So this is a very wide and diverse program of outreach across a large range of partners and education providers. In terms of your reflection, reflect on what partnerships and networks you could be developing with education and training providers. Who could you reach out to? Who could you work with to make sure that your opportunities are seen far and wide and not located in sort of pockets across the UK? Moving to section 3, onto the next slide. So this section looks at, as you can see on the slide, removing barriers and bias in recruitment and selection processes. So in terms of good practice, what we're looking here is to see that data point of view. So are you tracking the social economic background data of all applicants? So you're able to identify and address potential disparities. Monitoring and maintaining the diversity of the applicant pool throughout the recruitment process. So ensuring that those who reach the final stages reflect the overall pool. So is a certain proportion of those who are from LSEBs applying, and how many are getting through to the final stages? Can you make sure there's a sort of a strong infrastructure of support available throughout that entire process? Other entrants have also been very transparent with their salaries or salary ranges for their vacancy adverts. Obviously, this promotes greater fairness and equal opportunity in the hiring process. In terms of reflections for this particular section, consider how you may be able to do some low-risk changes, maybe piloting some low-risk changes. So perhaps removing minimum grade requirements. We are very much in favor of those employers who are able to focus on potential rather than past qualifications. Think about interviewer training, for example, training to account for any accent bias against certain accents, This can all be very important to remove barriers to entry in the recruitment process. Moving on to the next section, section number 4, routes into the employer. So this particular section is looking at the steps that employers are taking to create well-structured routes into their organizations. You'll do well in this section by ensuring that all entry routes are equitably accessible to people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. So you'll make sure that those new hires are hired based on potential and paid fairly as well. We do know there's a high conversion rate between completing an internship and securing a graduate role or a school leaver role. Those of you who perform well have very often ring-fenced opportunities and also offer real living wage or higher. We can see that some employers who do not ring-fence and who do not ensure equal opportunities through fair competition, this normally and quite often disparages their opportunity and the likelihood of getting through and being offered a role at the organization. For your reflection in this particular section, take a look at how your ring-fenced opportunities and what you currently offer. So how do these opportunities sit in the greater proportion of all of your vacancies? What support is being offered to those applying from a lower socioeconomic background as well? What are you doing to help them succeed in the hiring process? Moving on to section number 5, data collection, the one very much focused on what you're collecting, what you're gathering. So we examine how you collect and analyze data to understand your workforce and their socioeconomic profile. So those who perform well in this section are collecting a lot of data and are actually using it to drive change. As Sarah mentioned, and we've highlighted, we've seen the baseline collection of data for sort of parental occupation increase in the years we've run the index, up from 7% to 58% for collecting parental occupation in particular. But many of you also run diversity surveys to collect data every year quite regularly, which is great to see. For many organizations, we're looking to sort of bolster those numbers and completion rates to something closer to 80% or higher to make sure you're getting a representative pool of data from across your organization. What are you collecting in the UK? What are you collecting globally? Does that sort of sync up together? We're taking a strong focus in this section on what you're doing to collect data and how you use it as well. So rather than just the makeup of your organization, because we're aware there's many socioeconomic diversity problems across the board. If you are collecting this SEB data, reflect on if you're using it to review how you're comparing to, for example, national benchmarks. Have you analyzed this data on an intersectional basis? So looking at how characters such as gender, ethnicity, or sexuality may interact with socioeconomic data to examine whether or not there are differences in outcomes for aspects such as team makeup, progression, rate, pay, and work allocation. So it's a very holistic view to data collection here. So it's not just about what data you're collecting, it's also very much about how you're using it and how you're analyzing it. There was also a point on this slide about the seniority level. So, for example, many employers that we see do collect data, but they don't do further analysis for senior leadership positions and how that is being addressed too. So that's something, if you're perhaps been entering the index for quite a while now, is something to look into too. Okay, moving on to section number 6. So we're looking at how fairly paid and supported employees are in their roles, how supported they are to progress through the organization comparatively to other employees too. So you'll likely perform well in this area, in this section, by understanding the impact of socioeconomic background on pay, progression, and retention within your organization, and will have implemented support to employees from these backgrounds to allow them to thrive. So those who typically do well in this section have looked at their class pay gap, if they do have a class pay gap, published data alongside a clear strategy detailing how they will reduce that gap. So that strategy will likely include targets that are stretching and are ambitious, also manageable, and the accompanying information gives confidence that targets will also be reached to address bridging this class pay gap. Reflect on the qualitative data that you have or need to have to assess employee experience, and evaluate social factors such as the role of internal sponsors to ensure that they are working equitably. So yeah, refer very much also on the data piece, reflect on what data you have and what you need, also to assess the general employee experience. Two more sections, so moving on to section number 7 now. In this section, we're examining the strategies that employers have in place to create an inclusive workplace culture. So what are you doing to make sure that your employees are performing well in this area and have undertaken robust and substantial exercises to understand the experience of those from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. So listening to colleagues and voices from those who've entered your organization who are from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, involving them in your strategies, and also how they have a say in terms of senior buy-in and long-term social mobility strategies. So in terms of good practice, we see that there are those within organizations who have a responsibility, perhaps a dedicated group or network to push internal change and drive best practice. As a reflection note on this particular section, think about what training and support can be provided. So as I mentioned, there are entrants who have employee resource groups or similar structures, and also equip them for success. So is there a budget for training? Is there a budget for workshops? Is there a budget for their work? And we also suggest making sure there is some sort of buy-in. So maybe a member of the senior leadership team could be involved in this internal advocacy piece too. Okay, moving on to the final section of the survey. So in this section, section 8, we're looking at external advocacy work. And that's work that you're doing to champion social mobility outcomes, not just within your own organization, but outside and across the sector and the wider UK. So those who perform in this section typically leverage their influence to encourage external stakeholders to act on social mobility and contribute to initiatives. Those initiatives can include working groups, lobbying in their sector and beyond. In terms of reflections, ask yourselves of your suppliers, your supply chains, whether they have a social mobility strategy in place. Think about who you work with and how you work with them. So if you do have a tender and a procurement process, ask questions about social mobility. Do they have a strategy in place? Do they take and measure economic data, socioeconomic data? Have they considered the index, for example? So these are just some questions you may want to consider when you consider your supply chain and who you partner with. As Sarah mentioned, not included here because it doesn't affect the scoring, there will be an additional user feedback evaluation section just to gather your thoughts about how we can improve the index going forward. But that is an entirely optional section and also doesn't affect how you'll be ranked across the new bands as well. Hopefully that was a whistle-stop tour. I understand as a whistle-stop tour of all of our sections and all the data for each particular part of the survey. Hopefully that's helpful though, and more than happy to take questions towards the end. But for now, we'll hand over to Sarah to introduce our guest speaker.
Thank you, Wah. And thank you to Jonathan Tate, Corporate Responsibility Senior Advisor from Linklaters. We've asked Jonathan to join us today because for you as employers who are returning to or considering entering the index, we thought you'd like to hear from someone who's experienced in taking part in the index, who knows what's involved and can share a little bit from his perspective. So yeah, lovely to have you with us, Jonathan. I think my colleague Josie is going to do you a little mini interview and just take you through a couple of questions about your experience of entering the index and what Linklaters has done.
Yes. So firstly, Jonathan, would you like to introduce yourself, your role at Linklaters, and then Linklaters for anyone who might not be familiar, please?
Absolutely. Good afternoon, Sarah. Good afternoon, Josie, and good afternoon to everyone joining. A pleasure to be here. My name's Jonathan Tate. I'm a senior advisor in the community investment team at Linklaters. For those unfamiliar with the firm, we're a global commercial law firm headquartered in the UK here in London. I have the absolute privilege of looking after the Realising Aspirations Young People portfolio of work. It's a collection of 19 funded projects alongside 12 charities and social enterprises, all of which are designed to introduce young people to the world of work and support them to develop the skills they need to pursue fulfilling careers of their choosing. Crucially, all of our programs are social mobility focused. We're working with young people from underserved and underrepresented communities who wouldn't otherwise have those opportunities. Probably not a great surprise to hear that we're huge fans of the SMEI at Linklaters. It's been my pleasure to manage the submission process for the last 2 years here at Linklaters, and I'll be doing that again in 2026. So very much looking forward to it.
That's brilliant. I wanted to ask you as well, what was your experience of what was your experience of entering the index previously, and how has it benefited your organisation?
I've already given away a little bit of that answer by saying that we're huge fans of the index. So it's been a brilliant experience, and I've thoroughly enjoyed taking that on personally. In terms of benefits, there are so many benefits that I would probably be here all afternoon talking to you about the benefits. So I tried to narrow it down to my top 5, and I'm going to start with my personal favourite. I think the SMEI drives a holistic cross-organisational approach to social mobility, and I'll try and explain what I mean by that. We all know that social mobility is a really complex topic. It's a big beast. It's something that's not easily addressed, and it's happening or indeed not happening across various areas of your organizations. So it's really, really important that the different touch points where social mobility interventions can be delivered come together. And I know that particularly in big organizations, we can be really guilty of siloed working. It can be really easy to kind of get on with the task in hand, focus on the thing in front of you, rather than stepping back and taking a big picture approach. And if we're going to make meaningful difference in social mobility, it's really important that we have that big picture approach and thinking. So when we go about submitting or making our index submission, we have to bring all of those departments together. We all have to sit around a table. We have to discuss our respective strengths and weaknesses. We have to be honest and transparent about the areas that we need to improve, and we all read each other's submission chapters, if you like, or our sections, and ultimately that pushes us forward as a collective, and it allows us to move one step closer to what I think is the holy grail, which is creating a progression pathway right from primary school to the very top of the firm. And I think without the SMEI, we wouldn't be as far along on that journey as we are. Next, I think a really obvious benefit of the survey, but it is a huge benefit, is it gives us a really clear framework to work from, and we know that's an evidence-based framework. And of course, that all-important feedback report allows us to make improvements. So I've mentioned that social mobility is a big beast. It's a little bit more manageable when you break it down into those 8 sections, and we can look at the smaller details that allow us to make a bigger difference. Our feedback report is hugely helpful, and we spend a lot of time each year reviewing the feedback report, reflecting on what we've done well and what we can do even better. Again, that breakdown of sections allows us to drive internal accountability, so we can identify who within the organisation is responsible for what, and we can make sure that they make changes in those areas. But it also brings us some senior buy-in. You know, this is a public index. It's something that we want to put our name to and make sure that we're celebrating. And so it allows us to get senior leaders involved in doing that. They really take an interest in it. We're very lucky here at Linklaters that our most senior leaders are huge social mobility champions anyway, but this gives us a vehicle to drive forward their support. Next, it sharpens our data process. We all know how important data is for advancing social mobility, and the index has got a brilliant way of exposing where our data processes aren't quite working, where we need to tweak and make changes, and that's incredibly valuable to us. If we're doing our data collection properly, the index should be really straightforward to submit. And so whenever we see those pain points, we know, okay, we need to make some changes here. We need to look at how we're collecting that data. We need to look at where we're strong on data and where we could improve. And finally, last but not least, it helps us to feel part of a bigger community. You know, it's amazing to see how many organizations enter the index each year, how important this is to so many people out there, and it lets us feel like we're part of a wider movement. And circling back to my original point, you know, social mobility is a big challenge, and we have to tackle it together. So those are my 5 reasons, and at risk of sounding incredibly corny, I think really the index should be more about the journey than the destination. So I'd encourage those that are entering the index to, throughout the process, celebrate the strengths, discuss the weaknesses, reflect on the feedback that you get, that really important feedback, create tangible actions throughout each cycle. And I think that's where you'll see the biggest impact in your organization and the closer to making those all important changes.
And then secondly, what do you think are the biggest benefits of the new banded system? And what are your thoughts?
I think the new banded system's fantastic, and I think we're very much moving in the same direction as a number of the other indexes. I think it's a no-brainer for me, so really excited to see those changes. We all love the little ego boost that we get from going one step up on the ranking, but that's not ultimately what this index is about. And I think the new changes will really help us collectively to advance social mobility. So I think the fact that we're in 4 different bands, it means that we can celebrate impact across different areas. And at Linklaters, we're perhaps an advantage. We're a big organization. We can throw resources at things. We can affect things in different ways. We know there are other organizations who aren't as lucky as us in that regard, who are doing absolutely brilliant work. And I think the new banded system will help them to be recognized as well. I think that it will help drive a clearer social mobility journey for different employers. So I think that the fact that there's no fixed cap on the number of organizations that will be achieving each band will really help to celebrate good practice across the board. It's not a case of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's really celebrating and shouting about the brilliant work that's being done in different spaces. For the smaller employees, I think it will be more helpful in terms of starting off the journey. And I really love the inclusion of the committed banding. I think that's a really nice way of putting it, because everyone has to start their journey somewhere. And as I said, we're privileged that our journey started quite a long time ago, but there are other organizations who are just starting off now who are going to do huge things in the future. And I think their inclusion in the index will be a really big boost. I think that there'll be a better platform for telling more authentic stories, both internally and externally. I think others on the call might recognise an anxiety within firms around, oh, well, we were this number last year and we've dropped down 1 place. What does that mean? Does that mean we've got everything wrong? And of course it doesn't. It could mean any number of different things. But I think the idea that we're going to have more consistency in bandings than simple rankings will be really beneficial, because it means it won't be panic stations if someone's gone down one place, but there will be real food for thought if we, for example, have gone down a whole banding. We'll need to think, okay, well, where does that leave us? What mistakes have we made? How do we need to rectify those mistakes? What can we do better next time around? And I think really important to note that we'll still get just as detailed a report as we did in the past. And so ultimately, in terms of our learning, nothing's going to change. We'll know where we sit within our sector. We'll know where we sit overall. We'll know what we need to improve on. And so for the learning piece, really nothing changes, as well as the submission piece. So overall, I feel very positive about it.
That's great to hear. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Ooh, there I am. Yeah, just to echo Josie, Jonathan, thank you so much for sharing your insights and your thoughts about your overall experience with the index, your thoughts about the changes to the banding model. I couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you so much for your time and joining this call today. And yeah, we're delighted you're coming back to 2026. Okay, just going to share some key points. I think I love this actually. We'll touch on what Jonathan has just said, but some key points to remember for your submission to the index, and then after this slide, some sort of guidance for first-time entrants. So, as Jonathan just pointed towards and said in relation to new bands, you can start the index and enter the index wherever you are in your social mobility journey. So, in fact, we see common questions about I'm very new, we're a smaller, new organization. How does the index benefit us? So, the great thing about it is that, like we say, the survey itself, sections are optional. So you fill in as best as you can, and you'll be able to see and find out and benchmark where you are against where you want to be, and you can put together a strong strategy for where you want to be in the future. Understand what can be improved, what needs to, what you could be doing in the future to improve your overall ranking and where you are in terms of promoting social mobility. Once again, we've really driven this point home, but data, even if you're not proud of it currently, for you to get the most out of entering the index, we really do encourage you to gather as much data and information as you can. This will really help you to track and progress, understand your progress over the years if you decide to come back. Do tell us about your concrete plans as well. There are parts of the survey which allow you to expand and provide more information about what you're doing in certain areas, when that's, in terms of your outreach, your internal advocacy. Each section has points at which you can provide more information. So do let us know what you're planning to do in the future as well. That really helps us to gauge what your potential is going forward and where you're seeing your social mobility plans progress. We are mostly focused on the initiatives focused on social mobility. We do get a lot of entries regarding general diversity improvement, but in particular, we are focused on social mobility. So we recognize that there is intersectionality and there will be overlap between certain initiatives. But if that is the case, please outline that clearly in your submission too. Also talk about your outcomes as well as your activities. So while we want to hear a lot about what you're doing, you also need to know about how you're evaluating your activity. Talk about how it went. And we know that not all initiatives will pan out for every sector organization, but it is also really helpful for us to understand that you reflected on that, or you can take away going forward too. Progress, all progress is good. Let us know about what progress you've made. Please let us know about examples from past years, and we always encourage you to share. And yeah, when you receive your feedback report, we'll give you a high-level summary of what you're doing well, where you could be, where you're performing less well in each section, and we'll give you detailed feedback on what you can do to improve. And yeah, we hope that, and we know from speaking to previous entrants that the feedback we do provide is both feasible and practical, and gives you sort of guided steps towards getting that as well, based on case studies and previous entrants too. Okay, moving on to first-time entrants and just some guidance for if you're very much new to the index and thinking about entering for the first time. So in terms of benchmarking the index, as we've mentioned, it can be very useful to demonstrate and assess how well you're doing by outreach or external advocacy. All of our sections, you'll get detailed understanding of where you are and where you could go to. Priorities for impact, so it'll allow you to see what's most effective for your organization, once again, areas you're doing well, what else to implement, based on analysis of responses and data from employees at different stages of their career. You can also focus efforts, for example, on outreach, hiring, retention, if that's where you want to be doing better. It's also great to build an evidence base, so something that Jonathan also touched on, raising awareness to profile of social mobility within your organization. That's a great starting point, and you can do that by collecting data, assessing changes between different years, and then demonstrate inclusivity to employees, which then in turn motivates internally and externally when it comes to advocacy. And yeah, something that we've sort of mentioned a few times, but is a roadmap for improvement too. So by measuring where you are currently against where you'd like to be in the future, you're putting very much practical steps for strategies in the short term and long term to promote greater social mobility in the workplace. So just some of the key points if you're considering, have never applied, never submitted to index before, those are some 4 key points there. Okay, moving on to sort of the financial elements of the numbers and actual cost of submitting to the SMEI. The entrance fee is 1,400 plus VAT, 20 for the 2026 index. This includes an individual feedback report, which once again runs through the best practice and personalized recommendations for each section. It's based on your response and the data we receive by all our entrants. And in addition to this, you can also purchase additional sectoral analysis for 600 plus VAT. These are for our key, currently key entrant sectors, so the ones typically that we see we have the most entrants from to provide deeper sector analysis. So as you can see on the screen there, banking, insurance, financial services, law and professional services. So if you are within those sectors, we are able to provide greater context around your submission and how you performed against all the interventions within your sector as well. So if you are interested, that is also available. And then the logistical side of things as well. We will invoice you upon submission to the index. So you will only need to provide payment once you have submitted at the end of July, and that is sent by invoice or a credit card payment. More details to come in the following documentation, but just an outline of the actual fees themselves. Okay, I believe we are now moving to the Q&A. I think Josie's got a few questions that have come through.
Hello. Yes, I do. So there was a really good question around whether the size of an organization would impact their ranking.
Yeah, happy to take that, Josie, and thank you. That is a good question. So obviously we've got in entering the index previously, we've had some huge organizations and some very small ones. We absolutely do take into account your size and your capacity when we're marking, evaluating and ranking. So we do expect more and have higher expectations of bigger organizations with the most capacity. If you're smaller, we will assess that proportionately because we understand that small organisations can't necessarily run such big schemes, and we'll look at what capacity that you have against what you've achieved. In fact, some smaller organisations may even find some things easier. Your decision makers might be more visible, for example, more able to achieve kind of full agreement on some processes than some of the big and complicated organisations who tell us it can be quite difficult to implement things right across the piece. So if you are smaller, please don't worry that you haven't the resource to compete with a Linklaters. We ask a lot more of Linklaters exactly because they do have the resources and the track record here. And as Will has just reminded you, if you're very small, if you're fewer than 50 employees, or you are a registered charity, we don't charge you to enter the index because we want you to be part of the community. So yeah, the index really can be helpful for everyone. Thanks, Josie.
We also had a question about what time period the index submission should cover.
Yeah, I'm happy to cover this one. So yeah, when you start your survey, there are three options. So we have the calendar year, we have the academic year, we also have your business year. You'll also be able to enter the year that applies to you for your period, for your index reporting period. So there's a lot of flexibility as long as it's within the last year. You can enter the exact starting and ending dates that you're reporting on as well. But yeah, like I mentioned, calendar year, financial year, academic year, and if you have, for example, a business year that's slightly different, you can enter the start end date as well when you complete the survey.
And we had a question about when the current Word document for the survey will be available.
Yeah, so very much a question from someone who's very much submitted in the past, returning entrants. But for those of you who are unaware, the submission, as I've sort of hinted at just now, to the index is entirely via online portal. So once you register, it will take you through each section and which ones you want to complete or not. So that sort of sends through to our system so we can effectively mark. But we also want to provide supported documentation. So there is a Word and a PDF version of the entirety of the index that you can refer to and collect, so work on offline, and then very easily sort of copy and paste into the online portal and submit prior to the deadline. That particular supporting document, that Word version of the survey, should go out in the next couple of weeks. So for sure, a couple of weeks before the submissions open, you'll have a version for you to refer to and coordinate all of your efforts across teams as well.
We also had a question about whether previous submissions will be available from returning entrants in the portal.
Yeah, another technical question. Love to see it. So this one is slightly different depending on who submitted. So don't want to get to technicalities of how the portal works. If you are a returning entrant, you've got the same account, you'll likely be able to see your submissions, but that's not guaranteed if there's a new contact for your organization. So if, for example, if anyone switched roles or left your organization and you have a new contact on the portal for your organization, they may not be able to access the previous year's answers. However, what we can do is we can always send the feedback report from last year, but just due to GDPR, we're not exactly able to send an exact copy of data from last year. But if you'd like us to go through in more detail each section, there will be a guidance document about how to complete each section, what we're looking for, which will hopefully guide you on how to submit for the survey. I think while you're looking for new questions, I think, Sarah, there are quite a few questions about how the banding will work. I can see a few questions here regarding if, for example, you're in the top 20, does that mean you're in the pioneering band? Would you be able to address that and give a bit more context there?
Sure. Yeah, let me say a little bit of that. So if you were lucky enough to be in the top 20 last year, you've got every reason to expect, if you've continued to achieve all the things that you were achieving last year and are continuing to kind of make progress, you've every reason to expect you'll be in our gold band, our pioneering band, but it won't map exactly to the numbers. That's partly because as well, and in fact Jonathan talked about, we're not capping the numbers in each band. It's about achievement. So we hope we'll be able to bring more than 20 employers into the pioneering band who've achieved that standard. So we won't be exactly capping it. It's difficult to relate it precisely to performance last year because it was a ranking. You may have been further down, but narrowly close, and actually you are achieving the high standard. So you've every reason to expect, if you're a returning employer and you did really well last year, you're in the top 20, you've every reason to expect you should be able to achieve pioneering, but it doesn't map precisely. I think someone was asking as well about would they get a banding or a ranking for each section. Again, great question. In your individual feedback reports, you will be able to see how you've performed in each section. We'll give you, those of you who had feedback reports will know, we'll give you a heat map that tells you where your focus should be to make the biggest progress, in which section. So you'll have all of that detailed information, but we won't publish that. We'll publish a single overall performance banding for each employer, including those of you who rank committed. We won't publish all of those, but you can if you want to, and we'd love you to shout about recognition as a committed employer. But yeah, you will still get all that detailed feedback. For those of you who would be first-time entrants, that detailed feedback really does give you that roadmap and that clarity on kind of what you've done well and what it is you need to do.
Amazing. I'm just aware of time and we're coming up to 2 o'clock now. So what I will say is that we do have a copy of all the questions submitted and we'll do our best to sort of address them in the FAQs document that we'll be releasing after this. Thank you all so much for your questions. If you have more specific bespoke questions relating to your organization and your entry, please do contact us. The email will be available at the end of this slide deck. You should all have it. I feel like the invite came from that email address as well. So please do email across there and we'll be more than happy to help. But just to inform you, and I think Sarah will touch on as we wrap up now, there will be much more information and supporting documentation in the next few weeks ahead of the applications and the submissions opening. But I will hand back to Sarah and Josie to wrap up.
Yeah, thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today. Or if you're listening back to the recording, thank you for giving us your time. We'll share the slides and we'll share the recording and all of that information that we've talked about, the questions, employer guidance, all available in the portal. So please, if you haven't already, please register your interest for the 2026 index to get all of our updates and information and to enable you to get started. We open for entries on Monday, the 27th of April, and we will close on the 24th of July at midnight. So you'll be able to get started. And please, you don't have to enter every section. Get in touch with us if you have any questions or need any information. We want you all to be part of this movement and part of the Social Mobility Employer Index in 2026. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we look forward to working with you throughout 2026 to achieve more social mobility. Bye-bye.